Hi, this is my review of Robert E. Howard's Conan, Jeweled Thrones of the Earth. This is a collection of adventures for the new Conan role-playing game, Adventures in an Age Undreamed of. These adventures are self-contained, standalone. They are pretty much in the style of Robert E. Howard's writings. He used to write many different adventures and episodes in Conan's life that had no relation between each other. You could see some characters, the names of some places, but they weren't linked together as in a sort of trilogy or the like. Now let's talk about the quality of the PDF. I do have some criticisms when it comes to the quality, especially when comparing it to the core rulebook. It feels slightly rushed. You have these bookmarks that make no sense whatsoever. It says ref 44, 43, 60 and go back, and they basically make no sense. So the rest of the bookmarks are okay, but it seems a bit out of place. The other thing is that I did find quite a few typos spread out through the different adventures. So again, it felt a bit rushed. There aren't anything too big of a deal that will present an obstacle in understanding the content, but they are there. But despite that, you have great organization, great writing. In fact, I was quite surprised as to the way different authors kept the Robert E. Howard style. That is, each of these adventures have been designed by different authors, but they all feel like something you would see in a Conan short story or novelette or in a comic book. So that's great, and you have these awesome looking illustrations and complete maps of the different adventure sites. Now let's talk about the content. First, you have a good introduction to what this collection of adventures represents, and they give you an overview of the different adventures and how to use them. Now let's talk about the first adventure, Devils Under Green Stars. This adventure contains a very interesting menagerie of tribal warfare and intrigue. The basic plotline is this. There are three tribes that in the past they were quite splendorous. They had these great civilizations, but they fell into degeneracy and decadence. So you have the Shotatse that are basically the richest tribe in terms of gold, jewels, ivory. And they are led around by this Queen Chitaka that is a silent queen. She only speaks through her advisor. And they have some very nasty methods of execution, but in my opinion these are more on the decent side, or the more human side of things, to put it in a way. Then you have the Mekutu tribe, and this is a tribe of degenerates. You have this androgynous degenerate ruler known as Henaton, and he has this harem where everybody's screwing with everybody. So and they have this nasty habit of torturing, of taking their captives and submitting them to different torturous methods and cruelty. And then you have the Tangani. And the Tangani are probably the most evil, believe it or not. They're up to par in when it comes to the Mekutu in terms of degeneracy and decadence. But the thing is that the Tangani have a very nasty ruler. Well, they are two rulers, Prince Azar and Princess Anepor. But they are very good at manipulating their own people. They basically keep them as in a sort of like an intoxicated state, sort of like stoners. They use these different substances to keep them intoxicated, and when they want to manipulate them, effectively sacrificing them for different things, they keep them like all happy and relaxed, and they can basically do whatever they want with them. But they can also drive them into an insane berserker rage. They just need to use the right substance for that. So the thing is with these three tribes is that each one wants to have the upper hand over the other two, but nobody is willing to attack another tribe because, for example, if the Tangani were to attack the Mekutu, the Shotatse could easily attack the winner of that conflict, which would have been quite weakened by the conflict and would end up with the upper hand. So they're kind of like at a stalemate. However, the Tangani princess, Anepor, has had a pretty clever and devious idea. She basically disguises her brother Azar, because he's actually a very capable fighter. She disguises him as a sort of like a killer ape creature, and he starts killing members of the Shotatse tribe, but he also leaves clues that to make it look as if the Mekutu are the ones behind the killings and that they have summoned this ape demon of sorts. So that's the current situation between the three tribes. The characters approach this area and you have many different hooks to get them into the conflict. With each of these adventures in the collection of Jewel Thrones of the Earth, you have a lot of different tips and advice on where to have these adventures, that is where they are located in the regions of the Hyborian map, but you can place them anywhere that you like, and you also have a lot of tips on how to do that. And so the area of Sukundu, where the characters approach, is quite treacherous. It's basically a very dangerous jungle. Perhaps the characters arrived there because they heard of a city of many riches, but they could also be escaping from enemies. So regardless, they arrive at this area of Sukundu, and they arrive at the worst time possible, when the fake devil ape has just killed some Shotatse scouts. So the Shotatse start attacking the player characters, but luckily a scout will arrive and tell the tribesmen that the characters are not to blame for the killing of the scouts. And so the Shotatse will offer the characters a deal that if they manage to help them against this killer ape and the degenerate Sukundu tribe, the Mekutu tribe, they will reward them. So the characters could decide to take this offer. They could decide to take some other course of action. There are also many tips on how to handle the situation. But let's say that they decide to team up with this tribe. So they will be accompanied by different tribal warriors, and they will start moving carefully around the area of Sukundu, because there are many traps. There are pit traps with some lions at the bottom, and they also have snares, and they have to really watch out where they are stepping, following the tribesmen as they start hunting down this ape demon of sorts. And they could get into a few scrapes with this disguised prince, but he's quite a capable fighter, as I was telling you, so he's probably going to be carrying out hit and run attacks. The characters could also bump into the chamber of the red creeper, and this is a carnivorous plant. And the tribe that keeps its people in an intoxicated state, that is the Tangani, keep sacrificing people to this carnivorous plant to produce a certain toxic substance. So the characters could end up as food for this plant if they are not careful. So the characters will keep on moving, accompanied by the Shotatse warriors, and will try to infiltrate the fortress of the suspected tribe. But there are actually many traps. There's actually like a wooden door of sorts that is actually it's just a door in front of a wall. It's fake, and it's just there so that the characters get attacked by different archers at different areas. And there are many places in this little trek through the jungle that could serve for different mental attack checks, because some sites are quite gruesome. I'm a bit surprised that you don't get many indications as, oh, you should have the characters do this check right here because this site is too gruesome, and they could feel despair and the sorts. So I think that's a bit of a missed opportunity, but nothing an able game master cannot identify. So once the character figure out that they have to go through a maze of caves to enter this fortress of the degenerate tribe, if they actually manage to get past these lizard monsters known as the crawlers, and there are many ways to do that, they will enter the Jade Keep. And the Jade Keep, which is a fortress of the Mekutu tribe, is a bit of a nightmarish place. And there are actually some opportunities for the characters to have these weird occult hallucinations. If they manage to survive the different patrols and the different traps and dangers, they will come face to face with Genaton's harem. And he has his sons and his many lovers there, and they will start attacking the player characters. One of his sons is quite gruesome. He has these magical eyes, some sort of mystical artifacts that, well, they give different powers to the user, but they also make you look kind of like a mummy of sorts. And the player characters can actually take those eyes and replace their natural eyes with them, but it's up to them. The side effects could be a bit gruesome. After exploring this keep, the characters could get enough clues to figure out that despite all of their degenerate acts, this tribe is not to blame. However, they could figure out this too late, as the other tribe, the responsible ones, will be attacking the Shotatse stronghold, and they will start killing everyone. That is, the Tangani are the ones behind everything. So it will be a bit of a race against time as the characters go back and try to rescue the Shotatse. And they will have a final showdown with the fake ape devil and Princess Anepor. I also like it that they give you many different ways in which you can handle the outcome and even the climax of this adventure, so that it fits the style of Robert E. Howard. And the aftermath is also quite open. Perhaps the characters end up in friendly terms with the Shotatse, and they get rewarded, or perhaps they also get into a bit of a war against them. So it could go many different ways. The next adventure, which is the Pact of XIABALBA, and I really like the name because XIABALBA is a deity, an American deity of death and the abyss. So this makes a lot of sense considering what happens in this particular pact. The plotline of this is that there was this city of the giant kings, and the giant kings were not giants really. They were just humans, but somewhat advanced, with a powerful sorceress queen. So they got into war with this huge force of barbarians, and the barbarians had the upper hand against them. In Robert E. Howard's stories, you will see this constant cyclical clash between civilization and barbarism, and in this case, civilization is losing, and this happened many years in the past. So when XIABALBA notices that her people are going to be defeated, she makes a pact with beings from the Star Girdle, which is kind of like another dimension. And she decides to become immortal while trapping her people and the barbarians, attacking them into a pocket dimension of sorts. They are trapped into a time loop where they have to battle almost like for eternity. And at the same time, they are tortured by the different beings that inhabit the Star Girdle. So player characters start as being part of a ship crew. Maybe they are traveling between cities, or they were hired to protect this ship. But there was going to be this maelstrom, this terrifying storm, and pretty much everyone of the crew will die except the player characters. And the first mate, there will be possibilities. Perhaps the characters manage to save some other crew members. And the characters, even though they are not in danger of dying, they will get roughed up. And they are not in danger of dying because XIABALBA, she has decided to create this storm. And it's basically just like a way of getting the characters into the island. She summons them because she has found a way to escape the pact. She has become an immortal, but not only is she has become somewhat mad with guilt of what she did to her people. She doesn't really like the pact anymore, so she wants to get out of it, but she has no way of doing it without the help of capable outsiders. So once the characters get to the beach, because the first mate survives that storm, he will start telling them all of the legends behind the island and all sorts of superstitions. You will have different jungle encounters, not only facing the different dangerous animals of the island, and they also find like corpses and mysterious areas and ruins, but you could also bump into a giant king patrol. So these ancient citizens will attack you, but because they are trapped between different times, sometimes they kind of like phase in and out of reality. So there is a chance that perhaps the characters' weapons could get stuck in their shields as they phase in and out. So it's a bit troublesome to fight them. They could also, the characters, while they are exploring the island, they could also bump into this ship that seems quite out of place, like it went straight into the ground. And you will see skeletons of weird ape creatures that the citizens of SEETHERS, the ancient city, have enslaved in the past to use as slaves. And finally, they will reach the ruins of SEETHERS. And you will get a description of how this place has been completely destroyed, but they will also encounter XIABALBA, and she will give the characters a bit of an overview of what's going on, and she will make them unwilling participants in her bid to escape this pact. And so the characters will be drawn into this time loop where they will have to fight against both the barbarians and the citizens of SEETHERS. So the characters have to choose what to do. The Sorceress Queen will try to convince them of killing, getting them to kill her, that is her past self when she was younger, so that she won't be able to do that pact. The characters could choose to, for example, climb the tower to get there, which could get them, subject them to different attacks from the barbarians or the giant kings. And there are also many ways to handle this differently, perhaps through the use of disguises or other more creative means. Or they could go through the sewers, but the sewers are quite dangerous. They are inhabited by spriggans, which are basically otherworldly creatures that feed from the fear of their victims. And you could also actually get into a sort of like a dead end of sorts if you are not careful down there. And regardless of what they choose, they should eventually confront the younger XIABALBA. And if they manage to defeat her, the city will start to break down. That fragment of, let's say, of time loop of reality is going to break down, and they will have to escape quickly. And they will have a final showdown with the sorceress herself, which turns out she has no way of escaping the pact, and she becomes this demonic entity. So if the characters manage to survive, they could actually get some treasures from this little expedition, and eventually escape the island with the help of fishermen. Now let's talk about the next adventure, the Caves of the Dedo. In the Caves of the Dedo, the characters come upon this map. It's an image that has been painted on a mosaic of sorts, and they see this place known as Hibris, and there's probably treasure, of course, so they decide to go over there. And this map is incomplete. They need the other piece of the mosaic to see exactly where it leads to. So the characters, while they explore this villa of Hibris, the entire adventure has a very cool feeling of like a haunted house of sorts. There are many random events as the characters explore the villa and the bakery and the baths, the kitchen, and many different events are just there to unnerve and terrify the player characters. Again, I think this is a great opportunity for the game master to get creative with his checks that have to do with fear and horror and despair. So because the characters could hear voices, maybe they will see a puddle of water dripping upwards. They have this strange sense of time displacement when for some, it could be like a couple of minutes. For others, could be a few hours. They don't know exactly how time goes by through that area. And eventually, they will complete the mosaic map, and it's actually like a trick map of sorts. It has some areas like three-dimensional areas very slightly that you can only notice when you press your face against the map, and you will see that the three-dimensional markings or engravings indicate a secret passageway. If the characters find the secret passageway in the yard, and they are going to find an entrance to an area that seems quite out of place when comparing it to the rest of the villa. There is this door that has a very clever mechanism as to how to open it, and it leads to a magic circle room of sorts. where the characters can actually learn a few magic Accordion tricks, to put it in a way. But here I think it gets a bit confusing, because there are two creatures, one called the Watcher and the other is the Thing from the Pond, and both of these creatures get triggered or activated when the characters mess around with the different glyphs and magic circles, but you don't exactly get a clear picture of where the Watcher is. So I understand the Watcher is inside the room with the magic circles, and the Thing from the Pond, which is actually the creature that murdered everyone in this villa, it inhabits a pond in the outside yard. But still, I think it could have been handled a bit more clear. As the characters press on, they will start getting clues of what this area is all about. Some things will remain a mystery. They will also find some like artifacts from the past, because these mines were Acaronian mines before. And the basic, what would you say, rather the source of all the problems here is that there was this very young slave that in the past escaped into these mines. The slave found this eldritch artifact of sorts that started to clone this slave, and also had some degenerative effects over the slave until he turned into sort of like this evil dwarf creature of sorts, and many different clones of this corrupted slave started to appear, and these are the Dero, and they are working sort of like slaves in these mines, and they also attack anyone in sight. And as the characters bump into them, they will also provoke these, they will make the walls and ceilings behind the characters collapse, so that they get trapped into this underground realm. There are actually quite a few opportunities. Well, there is a good chance the characters finding some valuables down here, but they will have to survive their fights against vermin and bats. And they will have to play this game of sort of like a cat and mouse with these Dero, as they're constantly chasing them around and hitting and running. So hopefully the characters will make their way to the tower and fight the ruler of the Dero and put an end to all of this and find their way out of these treacherous mines. But if everything goes well, they will come out with a lot of treasures from the underground, because there are precious stones down there. The next adventure is The Ghost of Thunder River. This adventure is all about the Picts. I really like the conflict against the Picts in Conan, and it has a very cool prelude where the player characters play as Pictish warriors. So the players choose the different pre-generated Picts. And the basic storyline is that there is an Aquilonian that has invaded the Pictish wilderness. So the Picts are looking for this man that was part of a Aquilonian war party of sorts, and they chase him down into this forbidden area. This area is an ancient tomb, the Tomb of Tumocris. The Tumocris was basically this powerful Acaronian sorcerer that had glimpses of powers from beyond, of the outer dark, and he decided to become immortal after gaining great knowledge and power, but the ritual takes a bit of time, so he has secluded his corpse in this tomb, and when the Aquilonian made his way into this tomb while escaping the Picts, he becomes possessed by Tumocris. And so the Picts will have to fight when they enter this tomb. That is, the players get to experience what the Picts face off against during this little misadventure. And of course, Tumocris will be too powerful, and the Picts will be either killed or captured, to put it in a way. And then the real adventure starts with the players controlling their own usual player characters. They start as a part of a garrison in a fort, where they serve as sort of like a buffer between Aquilonia and the Picts. Everything seems pretty standard, but they suddenly see these scouts escaping from a Pictish war party. So the player characters have to decide if they want to save the scouts or if they want to remain at the fort. There are many tips on how to handle different things, even though there are some areas or encounters that happen regardless of what they choose. It is the path that you take to those areas that matter in this adventure. So let's say that the scouts are rescued, and you will find that one of these scouts, which by the name of Hawk, will tell the people at the fort that he saw a family being captured by the Picts. There was also a scout captured by the Picts, and they're taken somewhere for some nefarious purpose, and they are being led by this ghost, a white man with a mysterious mask, which is actually the Aquilonian that Thumocris took possession of. So the characters have to decide if they want to go to rescue this family, because the one leading the garrison is not very keen on risking his life to rescue this family. So the characters could convince him or other people in the fort to let them go help this family, or they could disobey orders and go later on. They could even decide not to help the family, but there will be some repercussions because of that. So this adventure has a bit of a special ops sort of filled with Robert E. Howard style, as the characters have to be really stealthy, taking canoes, crossing the Pictish wilderness, facing off against the dangerous fauna in that area, but also they will have trouble with the Picts. There are many tips on how to handle underwater fighting encounters and different complications related to the wilderness. And if they make it out of the wilderness, they will eventually reach the village of Raven, where they will find more clues as to what happened with the family, as to the nature of their enemy Thumocris, because they could actually experience some visions of sorts of what Thumocris has seen in his sorcerer's career, until they reach the place of the Whispering Fog, where Thumocris is going to perform this ritual of revivification by sacrificing the family and the Aquilonian scout. The characters will have to fight against the Picts and Thumocris himself, but if they are lucky, the Picts will become quite terrified because of how the ritual is proceeding, and they could flee the battlefield. And one cool thing is that some of the Picts that the characters will have to fight will be the Picts they were controlling during the prelude, so that's a pretty cool detail. If the characters manage to defeat Thumocris and rescue the family, they will of course have rewards and renown because of this. And then we have the next adventure, the Thousand Eyes of Aumag Vel. This adventure feels slightly Lovecraftian, and that's really good, because you have this ancient species or race of worm sorcerers, and they are literally worms. They're not like half worms, half humans. They're like very intelligent and monstrous worms that they have this underground city, but they were defeated in the past, and so a human city was built upon their ancient city. But one of these worm sorcerers survived, by the name of Aumag Vel. And Aumag Vel has created this sort of like a mafia or cult above in the human city. He has humans, servants or slaves, and they have an iron grip upon the entire city. This adventure requires the characters to have a magical amulet in their possession. Maybe this was part of an inheritance, or maybe this was part of payment in another adventure. And so the servants of Aumag Vel are looking for this amulet, and they will attack the player characters in order to get it. Once the player characters become the target of Aumag Vel, everyone in the city is going to shun them, because they are quite afraid of this unknown enemy that is actually the sorcerer worm. So the characters will have a very difficult time trying to find out what is happening. There will be different non-player characters and places they can visit to try to decipher the nature of their enemy. But there's also a feeling of oppression or paranoia, because the engraving on the amulet, which is kind of like an abstract eye, can be seen in different places, so they feel like the eyes of Aumag Vel are everywhere. And Aumag Vel, the sorcerer worm, has this little an army of robber children, and these pickpockets will try to steal the amulet from the player characters. There are many different ways there are many different things that can happen in this encounter, but regardless, the characters could decipher that or figure out that this band of children could lead them to Aumag Vel. There's also a rumor that a princess was kidnapped by this cult to Aumag Vel, so the characters will have to enter this den of drug addicts that serves as the entrance to the cult, or let's say the inner sanctum of Aumag Vel. So after making their way through the den of the Black Lotus, they will have to navigate their way in this underground labyrinth that seems quite maddening. There will be, you will have to, as a player character, you will have to make different checks to avoid despairing because of the crazy tunnels and the many attacks from the servants of Almagvel, and the servants become more and more monstrous because of the cosmic corrupt energies that Almagvel handles in his sorceries. The servants of Almagvel become quite misshapen and nightmarish. So the player characters will have to fight their way through this underground area until they reach the Dread Sorcerer Almagvel, who is actually, well, the corpse of someone that this worm has entered into and is controlling sort of like a robot. And he has the princess tied up, ready to serve as the next host. So the characters will have to fight against the host of Almagvel and the worm itself when it tries to desperately enter the body of the princess. And depending on what the characters accomplish in this mission, they could actually be rewarded and have future opportunities for employment, because the father of the woman is quite rich. But if they fail the adventure, they could get into trouble with the people of the city because they didn't rescue the woman, because maybe they got them into further trouble with the servants of Almagvel, etc. Then we have the Red Pit. The Red Pit is an adventure that has to do with slavery. Your characters start as being captured by these slavers, and they get them into a pit to dig out limestone. I think this is a great adventure to handle as a starting adventure. So the characters have to escape their captors, this Red Pit, but it's not going to be easy. They only have a small chance. Because their characters were quite strong and, let's say, dutiful workers, they were rewarded by removing their irons for a bit. The slavers use this as sort of like an incentive, to put it in a way, for slaves that worked really hard. But the characters must take this opportunity to murder their captors, at least those that are closest to them. And they could start a slave revolt of perhaps removing the chains of different slaves, or convincing them of helping them to escape. And this could go in several ways. Most of the slaves they are not exactly well equipped and with high morale, so the characters will have to improvise. It's also a good idea to pick up different tools like hammers and even wicker baskets to use as improvised shields against arrows. The characters will also have to find the right way to navigate the entire pit, because, for example, they could take an open road that allows for faster movement, but you're also more out in the open, or they could decide to go through different blocks of stone that will serve as cover, but when they advance, it will be a bit slower. As the characters keep moving on and trying to go up out of the pit, they will have to fight slave drivers, one of them particularly nasty, which is Nazarus the Whip. Hopefully they will have convinced the other slaves to help them in their escape and have a bit of an advantage when facing off against many enemies. There's also a very nasty pet that of the slavers, with, like a giant lizard of sorts that could make things even more difficult. And at the final part of this adventure, the characters will have to decide how to make their last ascension maneuvers, because they could choose to climb the wall, just climb it like that, but they will have to worry about the attacks from the slavers, arrows and such. They could climb ropes and ladders, but they could cut the ropes. There are many different ways in which this can be handled. There's also a very quick but risky method of going up, which is jumping into this stone hauling basket, but it could result in certain death, so you have to be mindful of that. So hopefully the characters will make their escape while stealing gold and tools and weapons, or maybe they will manage to kill all the slavers. That will be quite nice, and they will get quite a bit of loot because of that. And then we have the SEETHERS in Darkness. This adventure features Amin Seleni. At first glance, he appears like a sort of like a scholar or sage, but he is actually a member of a certain serpent race, and he wants to recover a powerful artifact of his serpent people, and he's not exactly interested in keeping humans alive while doing so. So he, as disguised as a human through sorcery, this Amin Seleni hires the player characters to act as his bodyguards and his escorts as he goes into the desert, into an area where there's supposedly a lost city, which is actually a lost city of the serpent people. So the characters will have the challenge of trying to figure out if Amin Solen is actually human or not, and they will have to face off against the many dangers of the desert, a particularly nasty sandstorm, and they will have to make the relevant checks, observing the area around, taking the best route, handling their camels. During one point in this adventure, Amin is going to make a run for it. He's going to abandon the player characters and go on his own into this secret entrance into the underground city of the Serpent People. And the player characters will have to give chase if they want to get paid and perhaps get revenge on Amin. Once they get to the city, they will start notice that this city is damned and haunted. All of the spirits of this ancient serpent folk are still trapped there. They're like psychic energies of sorts, and they are quite angry because they fled underground when their race started to fall into decadence, and they started to become dumber and dumber, more dumbed down, to the point that most of them were degenerated into these very stupid brutes. And they have these intelligent rulers that kept things somewhat under control, ordering these more or less intelligent beings around. But with the passage of time, all of them died. So here in this city that feels also like a sort of like catacombs or a catacomb labyrinth of sorts, you have many different skeletons and saurian mummies, because they are pretty much like saurian beasts in their state of degeneracy. The player characters could also bump into this beetle swarm, and you know that if there's a desert adventure, there are probably going to be killer beetles. It's a bit of a staple in those sorts of adventures. So as they make their way, they will find many disturbing things. They will start to notice that the beings interred in these different burial areas, niches and such, are not human. And the player characters will get assaulted by the ghosts or psychic energies of this place, so we have to make the relevant checks not to feel fear and despair. And the different degenerate saurian skeletons will start to come alive with the rest of the mummies. And if the player characters make it deeper and deeper, navigating the galleries and the crypts, they will have to fight against even more dangerous mummies, which are basically the rulers of this reptilian race of sorts. And player characters could get intelligent and start burning all of the skeletons, but Conan, because this is a very gritty game in style of Robert E. Howard's writings, the dangers of heat and smoke could also affect the player characters, so they have to be really careful when they are trying to do that. They could also bump into a nasty cave horror, which feels like a combination of ape with giant bat of sorts. It's not a winged ape, but it's around that style of monster. Deeper into the temple, they will find this artifact, the Eye of Sefet, which is the artifact that Amin was looking for. And it confers many terrible powers, the ability to cast curses, the power to dominate different reptilian creatures, and this is the thing Amin is looking for. If the player characters ever kill one of the Saurian kings, or that is one of these undead mummies, they will activate a terrible curse. They will hear this terrible chant of Relagraslajes all around, and I really like those magic words because they could sound quite ridiculous, but that sounds like a bit like an eldritch spell of sorts. And the entire area will start to collapse, and there is a pretty good chance of the characters being interred alive because of the way the city is collapsing. So they will have to navigate this place quickly and carefully because everything will be collapsing around them, and they will have to keep their eyes open for that opportunity to go back to the surface. As to the fate of Amin, it's handled quite freely. That is, the game master could decide to, for example, have Amin as a recurring serpent villain of sorts, or maybe the player characters will catch up to him and kill him, or maybe something else would happen. You get different tips on how to handle the situation here. And of course, the characters can take some riches from the tomb with them when they escape. At the end of this collection of adventures, you have a chapter that is called Seeds of Glory. And here you have a lot of great tips on how to use the adventures to create an entire campaign. They give you different campaign frameworks, how to use them as standalone experiences, as one-shots, You also have information how you can perhaps use the different encounters as inspiration or cut and paste anything related to the encounters, enemies, and dangers of the adventure and of the different adventures. And you also have scattered jewels, which are basically adventure seeds to further develop into adventures or even entire campaigns. Some of these seeds have the titles of Demon in the Ivory Mask, The Last Chant of Acadius Delo, Axem Sedding's Ring, Black Mists on the Morning Tide, The Walls of Hor-Shemish, The Homecoming of the King, Swords of the Lost Legion, The White Hand of Ashtoreth. You also have The Forest of Forgotten Gods, The Hammer of Karnath, Empire of Blood, Riders of the Eastern Winds. So let me tell you what I think of this collection of adventures. Despite the feeling that it's a bit rushed on the quality department, this is a great collection of adventures, mainly because, well, all of them keep the Robert E. Howard style. They all feel like they would happen in the Hyborian age. And that's actually not easy to do. I'm surprised that they accomplished that quite well, because none of them have Conan. And I actually hated it, for example, when they design a role-playing game around a very famous character, and they always have to have that character. So I'm glad that these adventures aren't like, in this adventure you have to help Conan, or in this adventure Conan is ordering you around to do this, or in this adventure you have to fight Conan. So each one of these adventures stands on its own, very powerfully so. And they present all of those different Robert E. Howard themes of the clash between barbarism and civilization, of decadence, of degeneracy, of everything. And he also has that subtle tribal politics as well. And I also think that they are quite educational, even though these adventures are fictional and happened a long time ago within that fictional context. You can compare some of them with what happens in our life, in today, in everything related to politics and society and races, and here you explore those themes. And I also think that these adventures are quite therapeutic in the sense that, well, it's Conan. You can have all sorts of brutal fights, no mercy, no regret, in the style of Conan being a different hero when measured to the standards of what a hero is today. And you can just cut loose and engage in all sorts of savagery against your enemies while obtaining gold and glory. So you experience that pleasure of crush your enemies and see them ruin before you. I also like it that all of the adventures have different encounters that have like subsystems. That is, you get many cool ideas on how to use the different rules elements found in the core Conan rulebook and use them in interesting ways so that each encounter feels unique. The players are going to remember, oh, that's the scene when the slave driver jumped up on the table and he started using his whip, and I had to do these checks and I had to keep this in mind to fight him. Oh, that's the scene where we were crossing the river and the pigs started jumping at us and we had to use this skill or that. So it's really cool, and it will also serve you as inspiration when you design your own Conan adventures. So I highly recommend that you get Jeweled Thrones of the Earth. It's a great collection of adventures. I'm really pleased on how they kept the Robert E. Howard style, and overall a great collection, especially if you are starting to play the Conan adventures in an age of dreamed of the role-playing game. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.